Well, thank you. Thanks, Farana. I think the middle quote really kind of summarizes what I was going to say, which is research is what we do when we don't know what we're doing. And it's really hard to stand up in front of this group of people and say, actually, we don't understand biology. We don't understand which chemotherapies work and when and why and where. And sometimes we don't even understand anything about diet or supplementation. And so that's what we're working on, is a better understanding of it. And when you bring a group of people together with expertise from all different areas, you can create some really amazing things. And so James is going to talk about the Delphi and what we're doing there. But first I want to recognize Katie and Teresa, because the reason we're doing this project is because, number one, they went to the Canadian Cancer Society and they said, you guys fund a lot of other cancers, but when's the last time you funded gastric cancer? And when's the last time there was a patient-focused grant? I mean, you study all these cells and molecular biology and things like that and chemo drugs, but when's the last time there was something that was really patient-focused? And by the way, how are you involving patients in the process of grants, and how are you involving patients in the process of funding grants? And so that was really advocacy by this group and by Katie and Teresa to highlight that to Canadian Cancer Society and to create some of these grant opportunities. Second thing is the grant opportunity came out. I'm going to tell the story, and I looked at it and I thought, God, I'm really kind of busy right now because I'm doing this other thing and this other thing and this other thing. And I didn't start anything. And Teresa called me and said, okay, what are you doing? I got you this grant. We got all this money. Let's roll. And then Teresa said, by the way, I've already assembled the team. You got Dr. Bresden, you've got Dr. Alamova, and we're going to meet. And it was in COVID and it was by Zoom, because I remember Christine was sitting in her backyard on the Zoom call. And we had the opportunity to present last year, and I highlighted Monica, who helped us write the grant because she was our master's student at the time, and she is in medical school now, and so she's passed the torch to us to carry on a lot of this. So some of these questions we don't know the answer to, so that's why we gave you guys this survey. So we really want to hear from you and hear what you think about these answers. And we're going to take your answers and collate them and hold them up side to side with what our expert panel is telling us. So I'm going to pass it over to James. He's going to describe the expert panel and kind of where we are in this process.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coburn. My name is James Thistle. I'm a second-year medical student. I've had the pleasure of being part of what I think is one of the most amazing experiences that sort of coalesce science and just humanity. And what this is, as you've heard thrown around, this term is a Delphi. And what that is at its basis is just really an expert panel. But there's something different about this expert panel that you'll notice. If you look on the top left, it's the composition. This Delphi is really pushed by patients and patient advocates, particularly my gut feeling through Teresa and Katie, and a number of physicians from different backgrounds who interact with gastric cancer and are involved in that care. And so what they've done is they've come together, and the first Zoom meeting was in November, and everyone came together, and there was a meeting about over 300 statements relating to nutritional care in gastric cancer. Some of these are the highlights. I won't go over all of them for time, but if we could go to the next slide. You'll see this was the meeting, and there's a lot of people there, with the orange, that's the cancer care color. If we could go to the next slide. And so today we ran one in here. We ran a quick survey. If you haven't had a chance, there's a paper around. We still want to hear from you and see what you think. And this was sort of the people who answered today. We had 18 responses. Thank you for those who responded. And we have some patients and some healthcare providers. Next slide. And so I want to highlight what this sort of looks like. We gave a statement. You can see on the left side, there's a statement. And then there's sort of a rating. You rate whether something is appropriate, and 1 is inappropriate and 9 is appropriate. So you rate on that scale. Is something appropriate? And so let's look at first one. And you see the first one, it talks about having a dietitian involved within care. And this is very similar to what we saw on the expert panel in our Delphi, is that there's a high appropriateness or high agreement that it is appropriate to have dietitians involved in care for gastric cancer patients. I think I don't need to explain that to you. I think that's been talked about a lot today, just in terms of nutrition. If we move to the next statement, though, sorry, just one slide back. The middle statement, you'll see that in the context in which there are no nutritional deficiencies, should we be supplementing? So if someone does not have a vitamin B, B12 deficiency, should they be getting vitamin B12? There's a large uncertainty there. It doesn't really push to one side. It's a bit all over the place. And that's very similar to what we're seeing in the Delphi. And so experts are really discussing these things because things like vitamin D, you probably already take on a daily basis. So that in itself could be seen as appropriate. And then you see things like the last one, where you see patients should be paying for prescribed vitamins and minerals out of pocket. And you see that that's highly inappropriate. And that's very similar to what we've seen. And this really represents another side of this grant, which is advocacy, is advocating for funding and resources that will support patients who are going through gastric cancer. And so this is part of what this grant is doing, is also saying, hey, look, we have, patients actually saying this, experts are saying this, we need more resources. We need to have people supporting this. So could you go to the next slide? And as we approach creating these guidelines, that picture in the bottom left just represents that everyone is very different. Someone on the panel said there are gazillion different situations. Humans are very different and very unique. Each patient requires a unique and different approach. And so what we can try and do is sort of go and create a framework. You see the fish bones representing a framework where we have a baseline. And what we can do is then take different aspects of gastric cancer nutrition and then start maybe with, okay, we don't know so much about general nutrition and monitoring. Let's make more general statements. But we know that we need funding and coverage to support gastric cancer patients, especially in the long term. And so we can be very specific, and that can implore different governmental agencies, different funding agencies to be involved in this. And if you could go to the next slide, please. And you'll see here, this is sort of one of the key points that came out of the first meeting in the Delphi, is care sort of feels like what you're seeing on the left. And I think this may resonate with some of you, is that care is very intertwined, it's interspersed. The patient has to navigate themselves through this very complex system, dealing with a very complex problem. And one of the things that came out of this Delphi right towards the end is, well, why don't you just put in a patient navigator? And what that does is it turns it into that kind of model where the patient goes to the patient navigator, but the navigator has specific directives that tell them, okay, they need to see their surgical oncologist. Okay, now they need to see their dietitian. They need their blood work done. Let's make sure that the hematologist is on top of that. And so this is sort of what is coming out of this Delphi. And it's really a beautiful thing in which people are coming together and coming to consensus about what care should look like for gastric cancer. And I think that ends it there. But please do respond to the paper that's going out. If you want to do a QR code instead, please do that. It really helps in terms of just making sure that these guidelines that are going to be created are in the right direction and they're actually patient-focused and will actually help those who have gastric cancer. Thank you very much.